Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Rebecca Bryant. I'm going to be talking about some research we've done here at OCLC Research on the topic of social interoperability. So, a little bit about me. I serve as Senior Program Officer with the Research Library Partnership, which is a transnational group of about 130 libraries, and that are research libraries from around the world. And we do both engagement work as well as research work with these libraries. And we have a number of programmatic areas, including metadata, which you might expect for us being OCLC. We also work with special collections, resource sharing, and then there's my area of interest, which is emerging areas of research support. And so that's sort of the theme of which I'll be talking about today. I've been with OCLC for close to 7 years. I spent much of my career as a university administrator at a large Big Ten institution, actually working in academic affairs. Spent a couple of years as a program officer with ORCID, and really love having a job that pulls all that together here. So, no surprise to you, today libraries have to increasingly partner with a lot of other stakeholders on campus. That could be things like providing services for research data management, helping support ORCID adoption across the institution. It also might mean providing services for research impact analysis, helping researchers with citation management, or also implementing things like RIM systems. And even in the case of like ORCID adoption, you can see that there are all these different stakeholders, the research office, the graduate school, campus IT, academic affairs, that the library must also partner with in order to make progress. But to quote my friend Dave Scherer, this can feel a lot like herding cats because it can be really hard to get all of those people together and moving in the same direction. So this was really why we pursued some of this work, is to try to understand the social stuff. And throughout my career working in higher ed, working on tech projects, this is what people have typically called this. It's the social stuff. But what do we mean by that, right? And what I would often hear is like, well, the technology is really hard, but we have to address all the social stuff. And that would kind of be the end of the conversation, right? So, a group of us at OCLC Research, including my colleague Brian Lavoie, holding the coffee cup here, uh, uh, conducted a series of 22 semi structured interviews with non library stakeholders. So, these are people from campus IT, from academic affairs, a graduate dean, and folks from the research office to ask for their input on how they work collaboratively with the library. And this ended up with a few things. It ended up with this report called Social Interoperability and Research Support, but it also gave us a replacement for this term, the social stuff. We really encourage talking about this as social interoperability. You could think about it as the counterpart of technical interoperability, but I think it's much more than that. I think that we need this social interoperability, or this stewarding and developing of relationships working across units and promoting respect, communication, trust, and understanding. We need that in lots of ways that we work at our institution. And so this is our report. It's available at this link that you can see here. And like all of our work at OCLC Research is available open access. So I'll provide just a few highlights from the report. One of the things I found really useful in looking at the literature about understanding this space is the work of systems engineer and former university leader William Rouse. He talks about universities as complex adaptive systems. When I read his work, I thought, oh my gosh, I wish I'd known this 20 years ago. It would have helped me so much. And that's why we've also really drawn upon this in the report about his discussion of academic institutions as being complex. You won't know that they're complex because you're living that. But some of the things he talks about is that they're self-organized. So they are organized, they have their hierarchies, but they're also organized in ways that are invisible, that you have to figure out on your own. They're filled with people doing their own things, moving in different directions, have different competing goals, and there's no single point of control. In fact, one of the people we interviewed said, mandates are your first and fastest way to fail. So within that, we have to find other ways to work. So we synthesized from these discussions 3 key strategies. And a lot of this, what I will also say is that this isn't rocket science. I mean, these are things that sort of common sense we know. But part of what I think is really important about our report and about thinking about social interoperability in this way is to think about sort of these concepts and to try to organize them in a way that it feels easier and more actionable, but also for us to realize that we have to invest as much into the relationships as we do into the technical. We have to set a time aside for it. So the first thing, build relationships. Take every opportunity to connect with other people. Show up at every single event they're offering. Be interested, be curious, be courteous, and take advantage of those opportunities. And find people, usually there's people on campus, usually there's people in our organizations who are real hubs. They're connectors, they know everybody, and they're generous. Find those people and leverage them. And then once your relationship is richer, see if there are ways that you can cement that relationship a little more. Maybe there's a way to have shared staff or have your staff in their office for a while or embed staff in different ways so that that relationship becomes a little bit more closely aligned. The second strategy is really to secure buy-in. And of course, your Communications 101 class was really about know your audience. But again, this is true. But what I would also add is that in knowing your audience, it's sure you want to look at their website, but you actually need to talk with them because the information you need is in the people. It's not going to be on the surface of their web pages. And only through that, through sort of the first strategy of sort of building those relationships, are you going to be able to get to this part of knowing your audience, speaking their language, and ultimately offering solutions to solve their problems, which is, after all they really care about, right? Just as we want to solve our own problems, but let's find the synergies to do that. And then the last real strategy is to troubleshoot. These were things I felt like I learned the hard way working as an assistant dean in a graduate school at a large research institution, is that you need to be sensitive to timing. Sometimes you want this project to get done by this amount of time. You've got the resources for it. Oh, but your partner just lost 2 staff. Okay, you're going to have to be sensitive, be patient, understand that may not be their top priority. Sometimes you may have a personality that frankly is just difficult. You just can't work with them. I had that experience. I actually had to wait for somebody in the registrar's office to retire before we could move a policy effort ahead. Sometimes that's reality, but the good news is there usually are other people on campus willing to work with you. So work with who you can. So that can be a real way of managing personalities, and you work through those things. We also heard from a lot of the people who we interviewed was that they felt that librarians often weren't confident enough, that they appreciated the value that librarians brought to this conversation, but they felt that there was recognizable sort of imposter syndrome. And these were non-librarians speaking to us. They would say, that's not necessary because we find librarians know things that nobody else is on campus, and they should feel really confident in that role. So those are my big takeaways. I invite you to take a look at our report. And if you have any questions, now is your opportunity. Thank you.